For Pacifica Radio, I'm Scott Baba. Vice President Kamala Harris closes out the Democratic National Convention when she accepts her party's historic presidential nomination this evening. Harris will lay out her vision tonight for the country and prosecute her case against Republican Donald Trump, capping a whirlwind month that began when President Joe Biden ended his re-election bid and endorsed her to replace him atop the Democratic ticket. Sagar Magani reports.
Kamala Harris will make history tonight in Chicago. Harris will become the first black woman and the first person of South Asian descent to accept a major party's presidential nomination. Her speech will wrap up the Democratic convention, a day after running mate Tim Walz thanked the crowd for bringing joy to the race.
We're all here tonight for one beautiful, simple reason. We love this country.
And a campaign official says Harris tonight will lay out her vision for the country, an optimistic one compared to Donald Trump's dark agenda. Harris will also share her background and middle-class upbringing. Sagar Magani, Washington.
Meanwhile, yesterday, the Democratic National Convention's third night showcased a familiar former president in Bill Clinton and introduced more Americans to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He was little known outside his state until Vice President Kamala Harris selected him as her running mate. Walz used his background as a former teacher and football coach to put a hometown spin on the Democrats' agenda of protecting individual freedoms and rejecting what they paint as the intrusive policies of Republican Donald Trump. Nick Harper reports.
It was a short but energetic speech from Tim Walz in which he embraced his small-town American upbringing. He said that his outlook was all about being a good neighbour, promising to look out for other people even if they had different views. He introduced himself to America, telling stories of his time as a high school teacher and an American football high school coach.
You know, when I was teaching every year, we'd elect a student body president. And you know what? Those teenagers could teach Donald Trump a hell of a lot about what a leader is.
He followed speeches which drew a contrast between Kamala Harris's campaign and that of Donald Trump's, including a surprise appearance from Oprah Winfrey, where she urged voters to choose the optimism of Harris over the cynicism of Trump, saying it was a choice between common sense over nonsense.
And that was Nick Harper. Meanwhile, more than 2,000 pro-Palestinian protesters rallied just half a mile from a neighboring park where pro-Israel demonstrators gathered. Uncommitted Democratic delegates called for a Palestinian-American convention speaker. After that request was denied, many staged a sit-in outside the United Center. Michigan delegate Abbas Alawiya said that they plan to protest until heard on the war in Gaza.
As soon as I get the call saying that they'll allow a Palestinian-American speaker from this stage, which I think would be very reasonable, then I want to go home. Until then, we'll be right here.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has toured the northeastern Ukrainian region of Sumy on his first visit to the border area since his forces entered Russian territory more than 2 weeks ago. During a meeting with Ukraine's military commander today, Zelensky said Ukrainian forces have claimed control of another settlement in the Russian region of Kursk and taken more Russian prisoners of war whom he hopes to exchange for captured Ukrainians. But the gains there come as Ukraine continues to lose ground in its eastern Donetsk region. The Russian Defense Ministry announced Thursday that its military has claimed control of the village of Mezove. In a success for Iran's new reform-oriented president, all members of his cabinet were approved by parliament, something that hasn't happened since 2001. Charles de Ledesma reports.
Iran's hardliner parliament has approved all members of reformist President Masoud Pezeshkian's cabinet. The first time in over 2 decades a leader has been able to get all of his officials through the body. In the parliament chamber, Pezeshkian says, "Let's join hands for Iran, for the people, for our country. Please vote for all the dear nominees here with your whole heart." The approval marks an early win for Pezeshkian, a long-time lawmaker who found himself catapulted into the presidency after a helicopter crash in May killed his predecessor. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Donald Trump spoke from behind bulletproof glass in North Carolina at his first outdoor rally since last month's attempted assassination. The focus of yesterday's event was national security, but he also couldn't help criticizing his predecessor Barack Obama as nasty for comments made the night before at the Democratic National Convention. Trump blamed President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for the deadly Afghanistan withdrawal and wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, but returned repeatedly in his remarks to the Democratic gathering in Chicago, where speaker after speaker assailed Trump as a threat to the country should he return to the White House. I'm Scott Baba for Pacifica Radio.